Recording in progress. Consent always, y'all. So, welcome to Debt-Free Women. I am so glad y'all are here tonight. I'm Kara Perez. For anyone who doesn't know, I have a company called Bravely Go, and we do personal finance education with a feminist twist to it. So I like to think of it. I'm super excited about this event. Debt is how I got into the world of personal finance. I always like to say I love debt, but I love to hate debt, So I'm going to allow my two other lovely co-hosts to introduce themselves. Lexa, why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. My name is Lexa. I run the Avocado Toast Budget. It's a social media platform, teaches about all things personal finance, trying to take the shame out of it, the guilt, and just make it as accessible as possible. And same with you, I don't love debt, but I love talking about debt.
Yes.
Because my journey with getting in and out of credit card debt is a big focus around my channel, but just also kind of how I got into the world of personal finance. So I'm very passionate about that, and I am so excited for tonight.
Yes, we're excited to have you. And Cindy, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I am Cindy Zuniga Sanchez, the founder of Zero-Based Budget Coaching LLC, a personal finance education platform for millennial women, specifically millennial women of color. I'm really passionate about empowering my community on all things personal finance. I am a lawyer turned entrepreneur. I practiced law, specifically commercial litigation, for 6 years at a law firm here in New York City. And in May 2021, I decided to take my business full time. And that's what I do now. I coach, I do speaking engagements, I have digital products, all in the name of educating my community on personal finance, which I'm really, really passionate about.
I love it. I feel so, I'm like, digital hug. I'm like, ladies in finance, digital hug. Yes, it's so exciting to be here. Y'all, thank you for dropping all of these, all of your debt in this chat. We have a lot of student loans. We got some mortgages, some credit cards. So let's go back to you, Cindy, and tell us the type of debt that you had, how much you had, and how you got into it.
Sure. So my debt was two parts. It was credit card debt and student loans. So I graduated law school in 2015 with $215,000 of debt. $202,000 was student loans. Most of that, like 90% of it, was law school. No surprise. About 11,000 of that was from my undergrad. And then on the other end, I had about $13,000 of credit card debt.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like hashtag relatable to everyone in here.
Lots of student loans. When people hear my student loan numbers, you can just see their expression. They're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah, I know. Same.
I know. And Lexa, tell us about your debt.
Yes, so my big debt that I focused on was $20,000 of credit card debt. And I also have student loans. I have about $68,000 in student loans, but I have the money to pay those off. I'm just kind of waiting until everything happens with federal student loans in the US, and then I'll pay those off.
Yeah, respect. Oh my gosh, we have Megan in the chat says, as someone who does mortgages, I am no longer surprised by student loan balances. And I just Megan has seen some shit. Yeah. Megan's like, I've been to war. Oh, yeah. I love it. I obviously don't love the debt. Okay, I'm gonna keep saying I love it because I'm very excited. I'm an extrovert that's been stuck in the house, so now I'm like, look at all these friends. So I'm just very amped this evening, y'all. I'm sorry, and for me, I paid off. So when I was in college, I did pay off some credit card debt that I had accumulated from having an internship. Gotta love those. I made $500 a month as an intern, and I paid that off my senior year. I worked 3 different jobs senior year, and then I graduated and immediately accumulated more student loan debt. So I graduated with $25,302 in student loan debt across 5 loans in 2011, and I paid that off in 3.5 years while earning less than $20K a year. So I come from a low income background, which I always like to share because I feel like a lot of people in personal finance or just finance in general come from higher earning backgrounds. And that's awesome. And I wish I had been higher earning earlier in life. But 'twas not to be. So if you are low income or you have people in your life that are low income and are working with debt, I just want them to know that they're not alone and they're not the weirdos. That's like a very common story. And in fact, it is my story. So, okay, let's talk now a little bit about our aha moments of like when we all realized we were like, this debt has got to go. Lexa, why don't you hit us with your aha moment?
Yes. So I call this my financial rock bottom story. So it was January of 2020, right before everything went down. And I had maxed out my credit card for the third time. I had like less than $10 in my bank account. And I went to go get in my car to start it after work, and it wasn't starting. And I remember just panicking because I had struggled for like so long with trying to keep up with managing money. And I was in grad school at the time. And same as you, Kara, I was also doing like an internship type thing. So a bunch of unpaid labor or very low paid labor. And I was really just using credit cards to make ends meet. And that was just kind of the moment that I realized that something needed to change. I wasn't quite sure how that was going to happen, but that was like my rock bottom of, I don't want to ever have to feel like this again, because I didn't know how I was going to get to work the next day. And I had a phone bill, I think that was due the day after that as well. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So that was kind of like the moment that started my journey into researching personal finance and just changing my relationship with money to work for me rather than having to stress out about it all of the time.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Again, hashtag relatable. Oh my God, the stress. I feel like, Cindy, you must have also had a like a heartbreaking, stressful moment with all your student loans.
Yeah, so my story is a little interesting. So for context, I grew up in a very low income community in the Bronx. My parents are both immigrants from Latin America. My mom's from Ecuador and my dad is from Honduras. And, I have a very typical daughter of immigrant story, 1-bedroom apartment, 2 sisters, myself, family of 5, 1 bathroom. Like that's like my whole background story, right? Mm-hmm. From there, I was thrown into the world of corporate law. So starting off, right out of law school, I was making a very significant 6-figure salary. But with that salary, I also had to pay off very large amount of 6-figure debt. And so for me, my main issue was that I didn't know how to handle my debt. I didn't know what was the first thing that I was supposed to do. My parents never really taught me about financial literacy per se. They were not in the position themselves to really learn about money. They were busy trying to make it so that we can, put food on the table. And so for me, I selected like the standard repayment plan that the government put me on after I graduated law school. And my minimum monthly payment was $2,000. That was my minimum payment on my student loans. And in my first year out of school, I made those payments. Now, just for context, that was significantly more than my rent at the time, which was $11.50 here in New York City, and a lot of other expenses. So my student loan payment alone was more than most of my expenses combined. And, but because I kept those expenses really, really low, I was able to, comfortably tackle that payment. So fast forward, I was told, make this payment and you'll get out of debt. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so I did it for an entire year. And in the beginning of 2017, I got the tax statement that you get, basically saying how much you paid for your student loans. And in my case, also how much I paid towards the principal. And if you're all doing the math, $2,000 times 12 months is $24,000 in the year. My aha moment came because of the $24,000 that I paid in that year to my debt, $4,000 went to the principal, $20,000 went to the interest. So basically 2 months worth of payments actually went to my debt, like what I had borrowed. And that was the moment that for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like I could not believe how much of my money was going to interest. So after that, I decided to run the numbers and I realized that I was going to spend $80,000 on interest alone, just interest. $80,000 over the course of the 10 years that I was going to repay my primarily law school debt. And that was my aha moment, because I was so just in awe, dumbfounded. Like I didn't understand how does that happen? I didn't know about capitalized interest. I didn't even really know about interest, if I'm going to be 100% honest with you all. I didn't even know what interest rates were on my different loans. I didn't even know that I had 15 different student loans. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what subsidized was, unsubsidized. I didn't know any of these things. So that realization on how much I was going to be paying towards my interest, that was my smack in the face aha moment when I decided it's enough. That's it. I'm going to learn about money, all the things, not just debt, but I'm going to learn about everything else. I'm going to read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, watch the YouTube videos, follow the, at the time, limited social media accounts that were talking about debt and money generally. And yeah, that's really how I started my journey.
Yes. Cindy, I feel like you and I are like the OGs, just because Lexa is a little bit newer to the world of personal finance content creation. But yes, I remember, so I had my, so I like to refer, I'm like, let me take you on a journey back to summer 2014. 26 years old. I'm working part-time as a caterer. I'm in Austin, Texas. It's hot as shit. It's so hot in Texas in the summertime. And I have all this student loan debt. And there's a highway in Austin for anyone who lives here or rather has never been here. There's a highway that goes straight down the middle of the city, I-35. It divides the city in half. And I'm in it, my little 2009 Kia Rio. Got the AC on, but not too much because I don't want to use too much gas because I'm broke as hell. Just literally started crying in my car and literally said out loud, money is ruining my life. Like literally on my way to my $12 an hour catering gig, and was like, I don't understand anything about money. All I know is that I have these student loans that are weighing on me. They're making me depressed as hell. They are $400 a month. And sometimes I was only making like $925 a month because I was just working as a caterer and like a part-time high school lacrosse coach, which is a seasonal work. It's only in the spring. And so I was just like, oh my God, this is destroying my life. And just like you, Cindy, I was like, okay, not only am I going to learn about debt, but I'm going to learn about everything. Like money is ruining my life, but fuck money. It's kind of how I felt. I was like, you're coming for me? Do you know who I am? Because if there's one thing I have, and it's an absurdly high ego, I was like, money cannot come for me. So I learned everything about it. And then I paid off all of my remaining debt, which is about $18,000, $19,000 in 10 months. And I just like really hit it hard. And it was 2014, like you were saying, very limited amount of people talking about money on the internet. Actually, that's not true. There were plenty of blogs. There wasn't as much social media, but it was largely like high income straight white couples is really what it was at the time. And they were mostly talking about FIRE, which is an acronym for Financial Independence, Retire Early, for anyone who doesn't know. And they were basically just like, I make $200K a year and I bought a Lambo. And then I realized if I don't buy Lambos, I can retire earlier. And I was like, who has a Lambo? Only Kanye, like at the time when Kanye was cool, remember? And now I just was like, what the hell? It was nuts. So I started blogging about being low income and paying off my debt. And that really opened me up to the whole world of personal finance. I paid off my debt and I started incorporating more topics like investing and saving and budgeting. And now here we are, flash forward 2022. Who could have foreseen? Who could have foreseen? Which I think all of our stories are a really good example of how if you dedicate yourself to something and you just show up, like if you just are consistent with your debt payments, with your content creation, with whatever goals you have, you will see progress. You will see change. And I think that's something we all too often forget when we're faced with a big challenge. Okay, now let's dive into the nitty gritty. This is why the people came. Let's talk the debt payoff journey. Let's talk strategies. Let's talk tips. So I'm going to kind of bounce between the two of you for this. I think the first thing I want to ask is like, okay, so we have the aha moment, right? What's your first step after that? Like, you're like, I need to do this. Step one. So Lexa, why don't you take it?
Yes. Okay. So at that point, as a little bit of a backstory, like I had gotten my first credit card when I was 19. I, at the time, was 23, almost 24. And I did not know how credit cards work. Speaking of like not understanding interest rate, I had no idea. I got a credit card because that's what I thought you were supposed to do to build credit. And I didn't understand that either. And it really just kind of started snowballing out of control, where all of a sudden I felt like I was on top of managing, paying off my credit cards every month. And then suddenly I wasn't, and I had maxed out my credit cards. And a few months before that kind of like rock bottom moment in January, I had heard about this concept of like a personal loan. So refinancing your credit card. And I thought, this is it. This is my moment. This is my ticket out. I will just do a fantastic job, pay off my credit card, get a personal loan instead, pay that off, and I will swear off ever using credit cards. Well, as we know from that January, that did not happen. I ended up not only maxing out my credit card again, but then a third time finally in January. And so that was kind of like where I was at. I already had credit card debt, but now it was in the form of 2 different personal loans, plus the $9,000 that I had maxed out on my credit card again. So I was kind of at that point, I didn't know that I was going to have this like revolution yet. So I was in panic mode of how am I going to be able to fix my car so that I can get to work and my internship, and how am I going to pay the bills, make ends meet before the next time. So again, took out a third personal loan, swore that it was going to be different. Luckily, that was kind of like third time's a charm. That ended up being the last time that I did kind of go into that maxing out my credit card and then paying it off with a personal loan cycle. But I am very thankful that that first step got me to a point where I could at least pay my bills and be able to get to work. And I don't think, even though it could have gone badly, that looking back on it now, I would have done things differently. But I also was filled with just so much shame and guilt around having credit card debt that I know that there were people in my life that I probably could have financially leaned on. But I thought that admitting my like failure, admitting all of my debt would just be absolutely devastating. That people would look at me like I was just lazy and stupid and didn't know how to manage my money. So for me, that wasn't an option at that point in time. So my first step was getting that personal loan and then going toward like the rest of the steps that I did to like changing my relationship with money. But that first step really just allowed me to kind of get by until I was able to start my personal finance journey. And like you were talking about, I kind of started my journey a little bit later. So in 2020, there were a lot more personal finance accounts. There were a lot more accounts that were not just ran by like exactly what you were saying, the straight high income couples, more so people that I could relate to. And that was a game changer. But I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But yes, that was like really my first concrete step.
Yes, good. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm glad that you brought up the emotional side of debt, because that is something that is so often glossed over in mainstream media. Like we all see those articles. We've all been featured in some of these articles that are like, this person paid off, 100 grand in whatever. And it can be inspiring, but like so rarely do those articles touch on the mental health aspect of it. And like, I got into personal finance from a place of anxiety and depression, like straight up. I was crying myself to sleep at night, convinced I was going to be broke forever, convinced I was fucking up my life, convinced going to college was the worst thing I had ever done. I would never use my degree. And additionally, like I was living with 3 roommates who had all gone to the same school as me, and none of them had student loans. They all came from much wealthier backgrounds. And so I could literally see the difference in our lifestyle. Like they were able to do things I couldn't because of my debt. And all I could think to myself was like, you're dumb, you're foolish, you're the reason, like you're your own biggest problem, Kara. And that becomes such a self-hating cycle so quickly. So I just want to say to anyone out there who's feeling some type of way about themselves because of their financial circumstances right now, like you're not broken, you're not a problem that needs to be fixed. Money is a fact of our lives. It's not a reflection of our character. So I'll get off thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Cindy, tell us your first step.
Sure. So I think that for me, so my journey is a little interesting because I did pay off my credit card debt before I officially like had my aha moment. And the reason why I first focused on my credit card debt was because that interest rate was atrocious. The interest rate on that was, one of my credit cards was 29%. So just imagine, I know, 29%. That's why anytime anyone tells me their interest rate, I'm like, ooh, I'm sure I can do you one better. Ooh. So I think that, and when a lot of people read my story in, the magazines, the publications or whatever, or, they see, oh, well, she paid off over $200,000 in 4 years. Like she's not relatable. Like she's a lawyer, right? And I totally always openly acknowledge my massive financial privilege that I had throughout my debt payoff journey. So what I want to do instead is hopefully give some concrete steps that I did do in my journey that I think can apply hopefully to everyone here. And the first step is to know your numbers. You have to know what you're working with. Like I've coached hundreds of clients and so many of them say, well, I don't even know what I owe. And I'm like, do you know what your student loans look like? No clue. Do you know where your interest rate is on this credit card? Absolutely not, Cindy. Okay, so then let's work on these numbers together. So in order to do this first step, you're gonna get 4 pieces of numbers, four pieces of data, okay? Everyone can do this. Number 1, your debt type. Is it a student loan? Is it your Chase credit card, your Bank of America credit card, your medical loan? What kind of debt is it? What is the name of it? Okay, that. Second, what is the balance on that debt? How much do you owe? A lot of people don't know this. Some of you may think, oh, Cindy, this is like so obvious. No. It wasn't obvious to me and it's not obvious to many. Okay, so first, debt type. Second, debt balance. Third, what is the minimum payment? How much do you have to pay towards your debt? Okay, notice I said the minimum payment, not what you're throwing to the debt, just the minimum payment. And finally, what is the interest rate? So to recap, debt type, debt balance, minimum payment, and interest rate. You need to understand your numbers because this is going to be something that involves strategy. Debt payoff isn't just an overnight kind of thing, right? So you need to know, what debt am I going to have to tackle first? Right? Because you're going to be paying all of your debts. Of course, we need to do that, right? We need to pay at least the minimum so that we don't default on any of our debts and damage our credit, right? But you're going to aggressively, ideally, focus on one debt at a time. So in my case with the credit card, that was the debt that I was focusing on at that point because it had the highest interest rate. And so that's going to be my step 1, is really just know your numbers. And if you don't know your numbers right now, and if you're kind of embarrassed about that, that's okay. You don't need to tell us. You can, that's why we're here, right? We're here to foster community, but you don't need to do that. So just pull out your notebook, pull out a spreadsheet, and carve out maybe this weekend 2 hours of your time to just figure out what all of your numbers are. It's going to be ugly. You might feel that shame, that knot in the pit of your stomach, but I promise you that having that awareness going in is really going to help you.
Yes, totally agree. I always tell my coaching clients, like, you can't change what you don't know. And just like I just said, right? Like, there's no such thing as you being a bad person because you have debt. That does not exist, right? So sit down, look at the numbers, even if you know they scare you. Like, someone wrote in here and said, like, I can't look at my numbers because I don't know my numbers because they scare me and I don't even know what to do with them. So now you have a plan, right? Sit down and understand, these scare me. I'm afraid right now. Like, I'm feeling fear. Okay. But just like Cindy just said, now you can look at the numbers and say, and I tell people there's 3 ways to pay off debt, right? You go by lowest balance. That's the debt snowball. So you can say you have $1,000 credit card and a $10,000 student loan. You can pay off the $1,000 one first, debt snowball. You can go by interest rate, like Cindy did and like I did actually, and that's called the debt avalanche. So start with that 29% debt. And even if it's a bigger balance. But then I always tell people there's a third way, and it's called the personal grudge method. And if you have a particular debt that is bumming you out, or that you fucking hate, or that makes you just feel like shit, pay that one off first, because the pure joy that will wash over your body when that debt is gone, it's going to be the fuel, the motivation for you to do the next one. And it's going to be proof positive to you that you can fucking do this, right? And now you can look back and be like, I did that one, right? I knocked that loan to mom and dad out, or I knocked that credit card out like I'm Muhammad Ali. And I want to say 77. I don't know when Muhammad Ali was at his peak, but let's say 77. And I can do this, right? I can move forward. My first thing was exactly what Cindy did. I sat down, I wrote out all my numbers. I looked at the interest rates and I was like, these seem high. These right here seem pretty high. My highest was 6.8 and my lowest was like 2.7. So I went with that avalanche method. So all right, y'all, I'm feeling the love in these comments. I feel like y'all are loving the personal grudge. Embrace the petty, y'all. Like, this is not the time to be the bigger person when we're paying off debt. It's the time to throw the finger and be like, you're going down. So, okay. So I just mentioned the kind of like 3 big payoff strategies. I utilized the avalanche. And Cindy, it sounds like you utilized the avalanche as well. Did you do that for the rest of your debts?
So yes, technically I used the avalanche, even though I didn't know that that's what it was called. All I knew was that this is a lot of interest. Like, this is absurd and oppressive. And so that's why. And so, yeah, it was also like a personal grudge type of, a debt as well. But also, because I treated my student loans kind of as one, because it was really one main payment. I had a private loan as well. My credit card also did have the lowest balance. So technically, Kara, it was the debt avalanche, the debt snowball, and the personal grudge, because it was my credit card debt was the one that I despised. It also had the highest interest, and it also had the lowest balance, even though, $13,000 is crazy, but that was the lowest debt that I had. So I did go with sort of a very hybrid situation.
I love it though. And obviously it worked. That's the thing. And I think that's good for all of us to hear tonight, that you don't necessarily, like, money is flexible and money is creative, and you can do 2 things at once, or you can do one thing for 6 months and then switch. So always be flexible. And then Lexa, what was your strategy?
Yes, so same kind of thing. I did not know that I had a strategy, but I love that, like, you kind of frame it as like that personal grudge, because for me, I had refinanced my credit card, so I had 3 personal loans, and I started with, not knowing it was also, again, the lowest balance, but also the highest interest rate. But I started with the lowest balance because I'd had it the longest, and I was like, I am getting you. Like, I am done seeing you. I am starting somewhere where I feel like I can make some progress. Because same thing, how you were talking about, like writing out all of your debt, knowing those numbers, getting past that initial fear. That is what I did for, I knew my debt because it was pretty, like, I just had those few to be working with. But what I didn't know was how much I was spending and how much I could like actually put toward my debt. So for me, one of the first things I did was like went back and looked at my credit card statements, looked at my bank accounts, and just wrote out everything I was spending money on to see where my money was going, because that terrified me. I knew I ordered takeout a lot, but I didn't want to know what it all added up to. And it was really scary because the first time I did that, I realized that the month before I had spent almost $1,000 on DoorDash, on like food delivery. And again, all of that like shame and guilt kind of like comes rushing back. And I think, look, like I knew I was a failure. Here it is. Here's the proof written out for me. But then I was able to take a step back and say, like, what is this number telling me? Like, what is the fact that I spent so much money on eating out telling me? And like we had kind of touched on a little bit earlier, like I was really struggling with my mental health. I was struggling with depression and anxiety. I had undiagnosed ADHD that I did not know at that time. And just a lot of factors that I was like, of course, like if I can barely make it out of bed, of course I'm just gonna order some food to eat out if I don't feel like I have any control over anything else. The idea of going grocery shopping, making food, and doing the dishes when I was barely functioning was like not happening. So taking that chance to step back and say, like, what is this amount telling me? What is my spending telling me? What is my debt telling me? And trying to look at it from kind of a more objective view and say, like, these numbers do not represent my worth. These numbers do not represent what kind of person I am. This debt and the spending doesn't make me a bad person. And when I was able to kind of do that after that initial shock, it helped so much for me to be able to move forward and make a plan to pay off my debt and start focusing on like reaching those goals, because I no longer felt like my whole worth was attached to these numbers anymore.
Yes, it's so important for us to separate the facts of our finances and the way we feel about our finances. Like I always like to tell people, I had a speaking engagement this morning where I was like, there are the facts about your money that are like, that's the truth, right? But then our emotions come in and can just like demolish the facts. Your emotions have all the power, right? And it's really important that we step back, like you were saying, Lexa, and just be like, okay, I am overspending on food. Like I am doing that, period, point blank. But you know, why am I doing that? Is it because I'm stressed out as fuck? Is it because I don't have time to clean because I'm in grad school and the world is collapsing around me? Like, yeah, you know what? Not clean, cook. So when we look back and we understand, we put everything into context around our money, that can really help release so much of the bad feelings, right? We can open that glass case of emotion and we can step out. Is how I like to think of it. Okay, so maybe let's talk about some hot tips for our viewers, right? We've talked about strategy, we've talked about our starting point, but anything else that we learned on our journeys that you want to share with our beautiful attendees here tonight? And maybe let's go back to you, Lexa.
Yes. Okay. So one of the first things that I say, especially in regards to if you are dealing with credit card debt, the thing that like changed my relationship and my ability to move forward the most was that I stopped spending money on my credit cards while I was in credit card debt. I am like most definitely not anti credit cards. Now that I feel more confident using them, I use them all the time and I love them and I love the rewards that I get, but the rewards are not worth it if you're paying 29% in interest every month, paying a bunch in interest every month. Not a fun time. So for me, and what I wish that I had done from the beginning was to just take a break from actively spending on my credit cards until I was able to repair my relationship with money, figure out a way moving forward for me to be able to healthily spend on my credit cards, and also make sure that I was paying them off in full every month. Because I think for me, trying to like jump into doing that and trying to go from basically using credit cards to finance my life to like healthily using them and paying them off in full every month, it was too big of a step to do overnight. I needed to be able to take a step back and stop actively spending on them. And that helped me so much. I really think that was the big difference between the cycle that I was in, where I would get a personal loan to pay off my credit card debt and then just immediately rack it back up again. When I kind of put that hold on, I literally put a hold on my credit cards so that it was like they were lost and I couldn't use them anymore. It made such a big difference, because then when I did feel more confident, I'm now able to like feel like I can use them without overspending. And I really think that's why I didn't cycle back into even more credit card debt, because I gave myself that space and understood that there's like a gray area. I think that sometimes we think that if we're no longer going to spend on credit cards, or if we have credit card debt, that they're just absolutely the worst thing ever and we have to close all of our accounts and swear off credit cards for forever. And I think it's important to kind of figure out that middle ground for yourself, but give yourself the space to do so.
Yes, I absolutely love that, because the space, oh my God, the space. I feel like I could talk for an hour about the space we all need to give ourselves, because look, we got 118 people on this call right now. None of us come from the exact same backgrounds. None of us have the exact same tools. None of us have the exact same privileges, right? And so we all need to step back and look at our own situations and be like, hey, you know what's worked for me, or what I think will work for me? And you know what freaking is not going to work for me? X, Y, and Z things, and then utilize those. So I love that. Cindy, how about you? A hot tip for the people here?
So hands down, the absolute biggest game changer for my student loans was refinancing. Refinancing saved me about $40,000 in interest. And I am so like, if you can, and if it's within your framework and plan to refinance your loans, do it. However, I'm going to explain what it is and all that. If you are seeking loan forgiveness, I'm going to repeat this 1,000 times. If you are seeking loan forgiveness, do not refinance your loans. Please do not. I have seen people that have done it, especially people that did it like right before COVID or during the pandemic. And now they realize that their student loans have interest again and they have to pay them now. And instead of enjoying this 2-year grace period off of payments and interest, they've had to pay back their of course, their loans. Or people that want to qualify for the public service loan forgiveness program, they are no longer eligible for that program. So let me take a couple steps back, because I know I just threw a bunch of information at you all. Refinancing is when you take on a new agreement with either a new lender or your existing lender, and you're going to replace the terms of your loans or your debt. So for example, for me, I had 15 federal student loans and I had 1 private loan. I refinanced them with SoFi. SoFi is well, they do more than just loan refinancing now, even though back then it was mainly loan refinancing that they did. And basically what happened, just so that you all know exactly what that looked like, is that SoFi paid off my 15 federal student loans and they paid my private student loan. Why did I do that? I did that because most of my federal student loans, the interest rate was from anywhere like 7 to 9%. And you might think, well, Cindy, that's not a lot. Like you just told us about your credit card with 29%. 7 to 9% interest on $200,000 of debt is an obscene amount. So by refinancing, when I refinanced those loans, AKA this new private lender paid off my debt with the federal government and this other private lender, which was actually through my law school. When they paid off that debt, I was, for all intents and purposes, debt-free from that debt. but I now had a new debt with SoFi. And I had a lower interest rate. My interest rate was about 4%. Cutting that interest rate from 7 to 9% average to 4% saved me about $40,000 in interest. And this is something that for me was a massive game changer. Now, again, let's go back to what I said in the beginning on why this is not for everyone. This is not for everyone because when you refinance your debt with now this private lender, they don't care about this forbearance that we have during the pandemic. They don't care about the public service loan forgiveness program. You have a debt with them now. This is a private lender, a private loan. But the reason why it was right for me, well, first of all, I did become debt-free before the pandemic happened. However, I was in the private sector and I had no plans of going into the public sector. So for me, I was never going to pursue the public service loan forgiveness program. So to sum it up, right, because I know I threw a lot of information at you, and so I want to be mindful of that, but I'm just so passionate about this topic because this is one of the things that when I started telling a lot of my fellow attorney friends about this, they were like, why didn't anyone ever teach us about this strategy? And I'm like, I know it's very significant, especially if you have graduate loans that have a higher percent interest rate, or if you have other private loans that have a high percent interest rate. So just to recap, refinancing is when you have a new agreement with a new lender, ideally to lower your interest rate. It's going to save you money. However, you don't want to do that if you are seeking any type of loan forgiveness, because that kicks you out of the federal program, right? Like when SoFi paid off my federal loans, I no longer had 15 loans with the federal government. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially if you're in the private sector. If you are in the public sector, however, there is something called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which if there are any attorneys here, a lot of my friends that are in the public sector, like, you know, DAs, public defenders, working for the federal government, they are pursuing that, then you absolutely do not want to refinance your loans. So I know that was a little long-winded. I'm just very passionate about refinancing, but I want to make sure that people like get it right. And they're like, no, they're not like, oh my God, well, I refinanced my loans because Cindy told me to, and like, I can no longer get them forgiven. So, you know, I just try to issue that disclaimer.
No, I think it's so good because we did have somebody in the comments who was like, I'm not even sure what refinancing is. So now they're leaving here with that information. So that's so good. And we're all leaving with that information. And yeah, I think y'all, you know, if I could go back and do one thing differently about or not do one thing differently, if I could give you one tip about like what I did, I think the most important thing is to find emotion in the process. Like I talked about being petty. If that fuels you, be petty. But if it's also something that you can enjoy, like I did see someone saying, I think what would help me is if my husband got involved with the budgeting. So, you know, working on communication, making it a team project to pay off the debt, giving yourself rewards for every $1,000 you pay off or something like that, you know, finding a way to keep yourself motivated and to keep yourself emotionally invested in the debt payoff, I think is so helpful. I lived a very, very Spartan existence when I paid off my debt. I mean, honestly, I don't like him, but Dave Ramsey would be so proud of my debt payoff story because like I didn't go out to eat and I didn't buy new clothes and I was stitching up my $2 like, what's that really cheap store? Forever 21 leggings. Cause I was like, I'm not spending $2 on these leggings. I literally did that. And I was so motivated by the thought of being debt free that I was truly, genuinely willing to do anything to make it happen. And that kept me going. And that kept me looking for like new ways to strategize and new things to do. And I don't recommend it to other people. Like, I don't think you have to live the way I did. I'm not saying that's the only way to pay off debt. I'm just very good with challenges. I like pushing myself to the extreme. And that worked for me. So find what emotionally works for you that's going to keep you going. That's my number one tip. I honestly think like it's so important. So, all right, y'all, we are getting into the end here. I did have one more question I was going to have us ask, but we are down to the last 12 minutes. So maybe, Cindy and Lexa, I'll have you like email me this last question and I'll put that in I'll put it in the email I'm going to send out to everyone with the replay. So that'll be like a fun bonus and an incentive to open the email. So now I think let's get into questions because we've got 113 people here. I want to make sure that we get to questions from people. So just go ahead and drop them in the chat. Please stay muted. I don't want us talking over each other. But definitely feel free to drop in the chat. I see someone says, should I tap into my, finish the sentence. Help us help you finish the sentence. And I will scroll back up to see if there's any other questions here, but definitely drop them in the chat so we can get to that. Okay, we've got a question here, which I love. I think this is so good. Any advice for paying debt while also creating an emergency fund? Lexa, what's your take on that?
Okay, yes, I'm actually so glad that someone asked this question because like my other big tip that I usually give for people is to not overlook savings and having that financial cushion when you're focusing on paying off debt. Because for me, that was also kind of why I kept cycling back into credit card debt, is that I thought that in order to pay off debt correctly, you were supposed to just throw any extra money that you had. And then if something came up, like my car was always breaking down, I'd have to put it on my credit card. So for me, I actually focused solely on building up some sort of an emergency fund first. It actually like kind of fell on, I had my birthday and I got like a little bit of a bonus. So I had, I think like $1,500 that I was able to put. And that was like my little tiny emergency fund that I had before I started throwing money at debt. But if you are kind of wanting to tackle both, I would say just kind of sit down with yourself, be honest, and look at how much extra money you have to either put toward building your emergency fund or to put toward paying off your debt, and decide how you want to split that up and what makes you feel the most comfortable. Because I think when it comes to emergency funds, the big thing is that there's never a set number for that's going to work for everyone. It is all about what is going to help me feel the sleep the best at night and feel the most in control of my finances and create that like financial cushion for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. I think the emergency fund cannot be overstated, the importance of that. So
Yes.
Super great. Okay, so Amber finished her question here, which was, should I tap into my fund investments or savings to pay off my debt? I feel anxious about lowering my savings amount below 10K. Cindy, you live in one of the most expensive cities in the world. You had a huge amount of debt. What is your take on this?
Oh, my emergency fund was my baby. Listen, I did not play no games. Exactly what Lexa said. All of it. Your emergency fund is not to be played with. So if your emergency fund, for example, 10K, I don't know what that means, right? Like, does that mean for you 1 month of necessary living expenses, 5 months of necessary living expenses? It's going to depend per person. So for example, if your 10K is enough to have at least let's say 3 months of necessary living expenses, meaning that if you lost your job tomorrow, God forbid, right? Can you cover your rent, groceries, your bills, cell phone, internet, basically your needs? And if the answer is yes, that's enough for that, well, then great. And if you're comfortable with that, then don't tap into it, because what's going to happen is that if you use that money to pay off your debt, what if something happens? I mean, we know that the world is unpredictable, right? So that's why I always advise at least, okay, general rule of thumb, it's ultimately going to come down to your level of comfort. Have 1 month at least to cover 1 month of necessary living expenses before you aggressively tackle credit card debt, right? Because credit card debt has like that really high interest rate typically. And then you can kind of take a more balanced approach, right? Exactly what Lexa was saying. A balanced approach on throwing money to your emergency fund while paying off debt. Now, do you need a $50,000 emergency fund if you have, let's say, 2 credit cards that have, I don't know, $3,000 balances each? I mean, that's for you to decide. Me personally, I would probably just get rid of those pesky cards, right? Lower my emergency fund a little bit because I know that that could cover me. But if the answer for you is absolutely no, I don't feel comfortable, it's going to come down to your level of comfort. But just so that you all know, I was actively saving my emergency funds while I was paying off my debt, so that when I did become debt free, I had my emergency fund there, which was nice because I had a positive net worth, not, you know, a $0 net worth.
Yeah. And I can chime in as somebody who I had $2,000 in my emergency fund, which when I was paying off my debt, which was about 3 months for me of living expenses, because I was living off of like $800, $900 a month when I was paying off my debt. Like I was so serious about every dollar went to debt except for the bare minimum. And so then when I paid off my debt, I was like, oh, I have $2,000 to my name. Cool. But then I had to build it up. And now I have 10 months in my emergency fund, 10 months of my kind of bare minimum living expenses, which makes me feel good. I keep it in cash. I know I'm losing money to inflation. I know the interest rates are shit. I don't care because it makes me feel secure. And especially as an entrepreneur, if anyone here is working with irregular income, I know I got my own back. And so this is like the next question I want to answer here is, would you recommend putting extra money towards loan payments or putting them into savings and investing? I think there's two ways you can answer this. There's the financial way, which is like, if it's your student loan debt that is on pause right now from the federal government, financially, the return is probably going to be better if you invest that money, right? But if you want to get ahead of those payments and you want to pay that down while the interest is at zero, while you don't have to make payments, you absolutely can. That's also good for your finances. So I think the emotional side of it is like, what's going to make you feel more secure? What is going to let you sleep at night? Because I used to wake up at 4 a.m. on the fucking dot. It was weird, y'all. It was weird. For months, I would wake up at 4 a.m. panicked. I was going to die with my debt, or I was just going to die, period. It was a good time. 2017, it was a good time. It was a bad time. What is going to help you emotionally move forward? What is going to let you sleep at night? And then you can also look at the financial side. So that's kind of my take on that question. We've got some more questions coming in hot and heavy. So let me see here. Let me see. I'm going to scroll back up here. Okay, this is a good question. Cindy, let's go to you because you have the experience with this. With refinancing, does the interest stay locked in? So once you refinance, you get that new interest rate. Is it variable or is it locked in?
It depends on the agreement that you sign. So remember, when you refinance, you're taking on a new agreement. So it's going to be new terms and conditions, new debt repayment date, new, interest rate and all of that. Also, it might be either variable or fixed. In my case, I chose a fixed interest rate because I wanted to know exactly how much my monthly payments would be. But you can also go with a variable rate if you're offered a lower interest from the get and you want to take advantage of that. Just be very mindful that even though something is variable, that means it can increase. So your interest rate can go, let's say you started at 3% and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It could climb up to 6%, 7%, especially given everything that's happening right now with the economy. So I know we're short on time, so I'll leave a post actually that I did comparing variable and fixed rates. I'll leave that in the chat.
Yeah, great. And Lexa, feel free to drop I already put all 3 of our websites and I'm going to email everyone, but feel free to drop anything in the chat if you want people to come find you. I think in our last we got 3 minutes here left. So let's let everyone know where they can find us on the internet and any final words of wisdom or just like parting advice you want to give. And so Lexa, let's go with you first.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I think this has been incredible. I will leave the link to everything, but you can find me on pretty much every social media, especially YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at the Avocado Toast Budget. And I always just like to end on and remind people that debt is morally neutral, and you are so much more than any number is ever going to be able to represent. And just know you're not in this alone. Like, we've been there, and trust me, there are tons of other people who are, if not in the exact same situation that you're in, at least can empathize and relate to those same feelings of shame and fear. And just know, I feel like just knowing that you are not the only one, and that it is not just a reflection of you being a bad person is so powerful. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on here.
Yes. Cindy, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Zero Based Budget on Instagram. I just started TikTok. Okay, I'm not as good as Lexa. I'm trying to get there, but that is the goal. But I do have TikTok, which I recently opened. I'm scared of Twitter. I do have it, but I am scared of it because it's just crazy over there. But yeah, you can find me everywhere at Zero Based Budget. My Twitter is ZBBC Coaching LLC because my name was taken up. But anyways, I want to, well, first of all, thank you, Kara, and thank you, Lexa, for, this event. I absolutely love being in the same community as the both of you. But I guess my last point would be, it can feel very lonely, especially if you're anything like me. Like, I'm first generation daughter of immigrants. I mean, my mom doesn't even speak English, right? Like, it gets so lonely when you don't know who you can ask these questions to. Find community, show up to these events, engage in the chat, engage with our content. We have free events, we have free content, ask questions, leave a comment, engage, because you're not alone. And I wish I would have had a community of women like this from the get. Instead, what I did is I searched for it. And I found it, and I'm so happy that I did, because now I get to do events like this where, we are in community learning from one another. We all learn from each other. So definitely engage with us, be on the lookout for things that we host in the future. If you're in New York City, hopefully we can do something in person in the future. I met Kara in person for the first time just a couple months ago here in New York City. And it's just nice. It's nice to connect with people and to know that you're not alone in this. You really aren't. Even if you don't have anyone that maybe in your personal life that you can talk to, you have internet friends. We're here.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, internet friends are basically all my friends now. So I absolutely love it. And you took the words right out of my mouth, Cindy. I do think, like, we've talked a lot about the emotional side of money tonight, which is so important. And yeah, I feel a lot of emotions every day about a lot of things. So if you are feeling some type of way, exactly what Cindy said, like, come find us, come talk to us, we've got Facebook groups, we've got YouTubes, we've got all the things. So your people are out there. I also would say my final piece of advice is, like, talk to the people in your life about money. You don't have to jump in and be like, what do you make, Dave? Though I don't know, maybe you should start with Dave. Maybe you should start with Dave and ask that question. But when I started paying off my debt, the first thing I started doing was talking to my friends of, like, oh, I don't want to go to that restaurant. It looks kind of expensive. Can we go to this one instead? Can we eat at home? Because I'm trying to pay off my debt. I always said, because I'm trying to pay off my student loans. And most people in my life had student loans specifically. And they were like, oh yeah, I'd like to do that too. We can absolutely do Netflix and dinner at home or something like that. And so you can really build community around yourself with communication. Not everyone's going to be open to hearing it, but some people really are, and you're going to build money buddies, and it's the best. So I've dropped my social media links in the chat, but I'm Bravely Go on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. It's actually We Bravely Go on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, because somebody has the Bravely Go handles and they won't give it up. So, if you want to, maybe I need a lawyer. Cindy, hook me up with a lawyer friend who I can get litigious. No, I would never. But thank you all so much for being here. The vibe, this definitely passed the vibe check. Like, the energy was so amazing here tonight. Lexa and Cindy, thank you for being you. Thank you for being amazing. Everyone else, you will be getting the replay email soon. I got to download it and then I got to upload it. So give me a little bit here. and you will have it for 5 days, and it will also have all our links in it. So see you on the internet, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank
Happy
you.
Women's History Month.
Women's History Month, yay!
Yes.